What's up, everyone? Welcome back. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Chris. So, I'm going to wrap up the month of October on what I read. I did finish 13 books this month. I was actually shocked I got through that many. Yeah. Was it a good month? It was an okay month. Partly, I think that has to do with I was trying to do like a spooky October type read, and I'm really not like a horror reader, so I thought, well, what could I read that would fall into the vibes of October, Spookytober? And I thought, okay, I'll go with witches. I like witches. I like witch stories. So what I did was, I'm not real familiar with titles of witch stories and, popular titles that have been talked about in the past, or they don't come up in my Audible feed, as recommended for me, because I generally don't really read that. So I searched YouTube to find a bunch of booktubers that were talking about like witchy books. And I kind of let that be my guide. I got a couple recommendations here. One was from Allie, from Allie's Book Nook, and Martha from Martha's Fragrance Corner. So I read theirs, and of course, Stephanie from Steph Loves Life has already turned me on to, oh my God, why am I forgetting her name? The ghost story writer. What is wrong with me? This is bad when you can't remember author's name, and I really like this author, so like, what's my Darcy Coates. That's, like the words, they're all up here, and I'm trying to like grab them. Anyway, Darcy Coates. So I did read a couple of hers. I really like Darcy Coates. Some of the other things I chose didn't really, I don't know. I think a lot of the things didn't really fit in with Spookytober. And when the ones that did fit in outside of Darcy Coates, and the witch stories that I read were okay. We'll get to that. Yeah. I'm coming to find, really, I just don't think that horror is a genre I like. Yeah, but you'll see as I go through each book and whatnot. I had one clear standout this month, and it's a 5-star. I had one 5-star read. I think it was just one. I don't remember now. I've since recorded all of them, and I'm pretty sure I only had one 5-star read. A lot of them were under 4. So it was an okay month, but I finished off strong, and I'm really happy about that. So anyway, enough of my chit chat here in the beginning. Let's move along and start talking about the books that I read. Well, October is starting out not to be too bad for my spooky reads. I started out with a witch book, and this is The Book of Witching by C.J. Cooke. Because as you know, I can't do like demons, and I just can't. It's a no. It's a hard no. So I thought, well, I could do witchy books and maybe some spooky ghosty books. So I started with this one. Overall, I enjoyed the book. It was entertaining. We are following, I'm not sure who we're following, but it's 2 timelines. One timeline is in 1594, and the other one is current timeline. So in 1594, we're following the story of Alison Belfour, and she lives in the Scottish Isles, and I believe it's called Orkney. And she is being accused of being a witch. And her timeline, her history kind of crosses with our other character, Erin. She has traveled to Orkney to supposedly look for ancestors and whatnot, and she went with her boyfriend and her girlfriend. And there was an accident, and Erin ends up in the hospital. So Clem gets a call from her mother. Oh my God. Clem gets a call from the police stating that her daughter is in intensive care. And when her daughter wakes up, she doesn't know Clem and thinks she is somebody else called Nyx. Now, the book goes back and forth between what was actually going on with Erin, why was she on the island, what happened, and back to Alison Belfour and her trial. And Clem takes it upon herself to start doing a little research of her own. And she starts uncovering things that kind of make it feel like, there could have been more going on here than what we realize. Now, that being said, I felt that Clem's character was developed well, Alison was developed well, and so was Erin. However, the plot, I felt kind of like, I don't want to say they were holes, but didn't follow through a little bit. It wasn't like heavily based witchcraft story. It was a more historical, because I was listening to the author's notes at the end in her research. Alison Belfour was a real person back in 1594 who was burned as a witch. So there's some history here, on back then, like what women were rumored to be witches, and they were under scrutiny a lot. So yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed it. It was overall, like I said, it was a good story. Wasn't like the best witch book I've read. And I haven't read that many, if I'm being honest, but I've read a few. And this one is kind of like ho-hum. It was a little slow paced. Yeah. And there was a part in the story that I don't know if it was a plot hole or not. I can't talk about it here because I don't want to spoil. I don't want to spoil anything, but there was a part in the story towards the end that came to light. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. How's this going to play out? And I'm not sure it did. So, yeah, I don't know. Is that a plot hole? Maybe. I'm not sure. But overall, I did enjoy the story, and I'm going to give it 4 stars. It was for the most part, it was well written. I like the narrator on the story. It was entertaining. It kept me interested to see, what's going to happen next. What is happening? I really wanted to keep going because I wanted to see how these two stories were going to come together. Yeah. So anyway, that's that. I'm going to go with 4 stars on this one. That is The Book of Witching by C.J. Cooke. And I think I'm going to check out a couple more of her books as well. So let's go ahead and talk about this next book that I've been reading. All right, so moving on to this next book. It is Craven Manor by Darcy Coates. This is like a cozy gothic horror ghost story book. I enjoyed it. We are following the character of Daniel. Daniel is kind of like uh, bit out of luck. He's finding menial jobs to keep employed. He's staying with his cousin, Kyle, who's not a really good cousin, but nonetheless. So he's just going through a rough patch right now. And one day this mysterious note shows up and offering him a job as a caretaker at this place called Craven Manor. Now there are certain rules that he has to follow. He has to stay in the cottage at night after dawn. Keep the blinds closed, the drapes closed. Don't answer the door. No visitors are allowed at the manor. Things like that. So Daniel reluctantly decides to take this person up on their offers. The person's name he signs at Bran, and take the job. Well, when he gets there, he's realized, there's a lot of noises and things that go bump in the night. Everything is very overgrown around the manor. You can't even see it. It's like in a forest now because everything's grown around it, and it's dusty and dank and old, and there's relics left behind. And in fact, everything's left behind, like, whoever was there just left and never took anything, but everything is very old. Yeah, I enjoyed the book. It was very atmospheric. As the story goes along, we learn about who Bran is and the creepy noises. You can't really tell too much of a ghost story without, trying not to give it away. So overall, though, let's just talk about the premise of the story. Thematically, it was very light. There wasn't a lot of depth to the story, so if you want a good light read, it's cozy, it's gothic. The manor itself has towers and forbidden doors and secret passageways. In history, there's history behind the manor itself and its occupants, some 200 years prior. Yeah, I'm saying a lot. That's me because my brain doesn't work very fast. So just forgive the ums. I'm not going to edit them out because that just ruins the video because it gets choppy. Anyway, I'm trying to tell you what the story is about without giving any of the story away. So, like I said, it is a gothic, cozy, mystery ghost story. I would say it's well written. Although thematically it's very light. This isn't, if you're looking for, great fiction, novel, this isn't it. This is a fun, creepy ghost story. I enjoyed it. There were certain things in there the character would say, and I'd be like, it was kind of like an eye roll. Like at one point he asked the ghost to turn around because he's going to undress. Right? I mean, this is supposed to be a spooky story, and something silly like that comes out. Oh, turn around. Just that stuck with me. I was like, really? Come on. But anyway, I did enjoy it. I like the character of Daniel. Daniel is very compassionate, caring individual. He's a good soul. He's a good, kind soul. And even though this was written as a thriller horror novel, mystery, gothic, ghosty novel, there was heartfelt moments here. And yeah, like it kind of just, gave you like cozy feelings, like, oh, I did. I enjoyed it. The pace was, in the beginning, it was a little bit slow, but it picked up after that. So I'd say it's like a medium to a fast-paced book. I mean, it kept you wanting to turn the page. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Overall, I enjoyed it. What else? Yeah, it was just a good book. Good book. There were moments in there, and yeah, I didn't find it frightening by any means, but I wasn't looking for a frightening book. I was looking for spooky, and this gave me spooky vibes. If it was on film, if I had to translate what I read visually into a movie, I think it could be a little scary. But reading it, no, it was good. It was a perfect read for me. I'm glad I chose it. I'm going to definitely read some more of Darcy Coates because she's a writer of this type of, scary, supernatural, ghosty stuff that I think I could enjoy without being like terrified. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead. I'm giving this book 4 stars based on enjoyment factor. If I had to give it on like, a critically, by way of, literature, let's just say, probably 3 stars, but I'm going by the enjoyment factor because that's pretty much how I rate my books, is by how I enjoy them. I'm not a book critic, and I mean, I could appreciate and I could recognize good writing and good literature, but I'm still not going to base my reviews on that because I'm not that well versed. But anyway, check it out if you want something spooky, fun, and just, enjoyable, easy read. Check out Craven Manor by Darcy Coates. All right, so we're going to go on and talk about the next spooky read I chose. All right, let's talk about the next book I read. And that book is Weyward by Emilia Hart. In this story, we are following 3 women, all connected through the same lineage over a period of 3 separate timelines. Alpha is in 1619. We've got Violet's story in 1942 and Kate's story 2019. Violet is Kate's great aunt, and Alpha, I don't know where she would connect to Violet because they didn't really clarify that in the book. There was a few things that I was like curious about. I'd say it was kind of like a plot hole because there's a question that I have, and I want to go on the internet and see if I can find the answer to it because I don't think it was in the book. And I'm like, something there's a gap in the lineage is where I'm getting at. Anyway, unless I missed it. So we're following these 3 women. Alpha's on trial for witchcraft and facing the possibility of being burned at the stake. Violet is living under the rule of her oppressive, domineering father. She's, not entitled to be educated, things that she wants to do. And, the father won't allow it, but she does have a brother and, he's allowed to move along. And then we have Kate, who is in a seriously very abusive marriage. There are trigger warnings on this book, so if it sounds like something you might want to pick up, check the trigger warnings first in case there might be something in there that won't agree with you. So Kate also inherited her great aunt Violet's cottage, and this is all set in England, in the countryside. And that's where she plans to kind of take off to get away from her abusive husband, is this cottage. Now, she didn't know her great aunt Violet very well, so she's not familiar with the story. So she sets out to find out more about Violet. And Violet, not being able to know anything about her mother, because her mother was a witch, and she was sent away by the father. However, the children think that she died during childbirth. But the father actually said she was crazy. And Alpha, like I said, I don't know how Alpha connects. There's a big gap there. I don't know what happened from Alpha to Violet. Okay. Basically the story, it's witchcraft, but it's soft witchcraft. It's not, it's more like nature, the birds and the animals and all the insects, and these three women are, strongly connected to the nature. So like Alpha was more of a healer. She would make like medicines from plants and heal people. Violet is just knows something's different about her, but she doesn't know what. And Kate, moving back to her roots, starts to unfold and uncover these things and discover these things about herself. So basically all three women have a struggle. They're all being oppressed and held back in some way. And their strength and resilience pull them through and make them survivors. And Kate, being at the end here of that little timeline, she has to unearth and uncover all this and discover that for herself. So in a sense, the three women come together and, ultimately Kate saves herself from it, right? So yeah, it's not really a witchcraft book per se. It's more implied. It's very soft. It's not like casting spells and stuff like that. It's not like, it's not fantastical in any way. It's historical fiction in a sense, but a story just the same. I enjoyed the book. It was okay. Wasn't the type of witch book I was looking for at this present time, but I still enjoyed the story. It was a good story. It was well written. I think this was the author's first book. And that being said, I think it was very well written and laid out, other than that one little hole light in there that I got to find out about. Yeah. So overall, I enjoyed it. I'm going to give this book 3.75 stars. It's not quite the 4-star mark, but it was enjoyable. I didn't find it like, I don't feel like continuing. No, I wanted to continue on to see what happened. It had good pacing, and it wasn't confusing to follow the 3 stories. They all kind of rolled into each other and came together well. So yeah, but overall, like I said, it was a good book. I enjoyed it. And so let me know if you've read it. That's Weyward by Emilia Hart. And I'm giving this one 3.75 stars. All right, let's move along. All right, let's talk about this next book. And that is called Come With Me by Ronald Malfi. This came from a recommendation from Allie, from Allie's Book Nook. She also has another YouTube channel. It's a wax channel, Sense, like myself. I don't remember that channel name. I'll put it in the description box. Anyway, this book is okay. So this really, October, I'm focused on spooky reads. I don't know if this really fell into the category of spooky. It had some ghostly overtone. Oh my God, what's the word I'm looking for? Overtones. It had some ghostly overtones, somewhat. This was basically like a psychological thriller, mystery type novel. I enjoyed it. It was good. So we are following this a character. His name is Aaron, and in the beginning, Aaron has his wife Allison and newly married. Well, they've been living together for a while, but they're newly married. and she is leaving for the day. She's a journalist. She's leaving for the day. She's going out shopping to a shopping mall, and she asks, do you want to come with? And he declined. So he receives a call. I can't remember, did he receive a call or did he see something on the news? There was a shooting at this strip mall that she went to. So he rushes down there and he's looking for his wife and he's talking to people, and there's all kinds of chaos going on. And come to find out, his wife was shot. And she has since passed on. Now, Aaron is totally destroyed and distraught by this, and also experiencing somewhat survivor's guilt because, she did want him to come with her. So he's got survivor's guilt. It's grief. Yeah, he's in a bad way. So shortly after her death, he receives a box of her items from her office, and he discovers a receipt for a motel in North Carolina. And he becomes suspicious. So he starts to follow this lead, talking to people, discovering things that makes him feel he didn't really know his wife. So from there, he is becoming even more distraught. Through much of the story, he is actually narrating the entire story from his point of view. There's very little interaction between him and other characters that are presented in the story. And he's also voicing his internal thoughts as he's talking to Allison. I don't know if I liked that so much because I felt like the story was very one-dimensional. It gave me the sense that I was, like, normally when I become immersed in a book, I feel like with Stephen King, usually, that I'm actually in that story, walking along with these people. And this just I felt just like I was just in Aaron's head all the time. As far as the ghostly aspects or anything supernatural, it was more or less, he'd see visions of Allison in the mirror, a handprint on a window, lights flickering on and off in the closet, shadows. It left you to believe, was that just his grief talking, or was there really a supernatural spiritual presence here? Yeah, so I didn't get the spooky vibes. However, the book did have good sense of atmosphere and tension in it. I think the author did a good job at building tension and that what's going on type feeling. I don't want to give too much of the story away, so as far as like where this journey took him from the motel receipt, because that's going to reveal more than I want to reveal. I did find that the pacing was a little slow. However, the slow pacing added to building the tension. So I didn't mind it so much because it just kept you gripped into the story because you were just trying to find out more about this separate life that Allison seemed to be having that her husband didn't know about, Aaron. So yeah, I did enjoy that. Normally I don't enjoy a slow pace in a book, but this pacing provided that right amount of tension to keep you engrossed and wanting to learn more. Overall, I'm giving the book 3.75 stars. It could possibly be a 4-star. I was torn between that because that whole inner dialogue that was most of the story kind of took things away a little bit because there were other characters, and the lack of interaction between Aaron and the other characters. I would have liked to have seen more interactive dialogue rather than just the dialogue within Aaron's head himself. If that makes sense. Anyway, so like I said, 3.75 stars. That is Come With Me by Ronald Malfi. So anyway, let's move on to our next story. All right, so let's move on to these next books. Yeah, normally I film these right when I finish reading them, and I just was on a roll. So I'm going to go on here, and first one we're going to talk about is Slewfoot, and I did take notes. That's why I'm looking down. In fact, let me stand them up so I don't have to look down so awfully. Because my memory, I read books, and though I remember them, I have a hard time talking about them after some days pass. Anyway, let's talk about Slewfoot. This is written by Brom. It is set in 1666 New England colonial times. We are following Abatha. Now, Abatha was sold off by her family. She's from England to a Puritan colony. And early on, her husband dies, and very mysteriously. And from there, weird things start to happen. She starts seeing things. And we come to realize that where she lives, there's a lot more going on in this area than anybody knows. There are like demons, so to speak. There are the wild folk, and it was a little hard to follow at first. Now, I am not real well read in the whole witchy type books, which I have been trying to read more of this month. So until I get a handle on that vibe, it's kind of hard for me to follow some of these books. Anyway, we have a demon character who is not quite a villainous demon. He's kind of a mix of both, because at the same time, this demon monster, whatever he is, that the wild folk are calling him father, but he doesn't seem to know who he is or remember things. He's not quite, like I said, villainous. He can kind of be very gentlemanly. And now this is a slow-paced book because there's a lot of atmosphere and world building going on. So Abatha actually comes in contact with this monster, and they kind of become friendly. Now, going back to Abatha, now this is Puritan times. This is a time where women were, what's that word, subjugated, and, they weren't allowed to speak. That time, religion was the core foundation of the colonies, and, there were strict rules and things that had to be followed, and Abatha was kind of a little bit more of a non-follower. So, but she had to try to fit in to this society, so to speak. And with the death of her husband, trouble comes, and mainly with the brother. So she finds herself having to fight to win or beat these people at their games and still be her own person. And now she's got this demon monster that we're still trying to learn his story, because that's a little bit unclear. Often referred to as Slewfoot, Satan. But it takes a long time to find out who this monster is. Overall, if I had to try to think back on the book, yeah, I think it was a good book. I think. Still, a lot of things are still a little unclear to me. Um, because again, I'm not very versed in the whole witch type books. Um, but overall, I think it was decent. It was, it kept me going because I wanted to find out who are these little creatures. There was Creek, Sky, and they're like little forest creatures. Creek, Sky, and I can't remember the other little creature. And you just picture these little, like, in my head, I was picturing these little kind of like strange looking characters. And who is this demon monster person? And because he doesn't know, and they just keep telling him, you have to remember, Father, you have to remember. And so it goes on and on and on. But, basically, it's a lot of, paganism and the Puritan Christian core there. So there's a lot of that going on. And eventually, Abatha has to really fight for truth and what she desires and kind of resolve what these little demon creatures are and what their meaning and purpose is. So I'm going to leave that there because I don't want to tell you too much and basically just tell the whole story. It's about little demon creatures, colonial times, Abatha. I thought she was a good, strong character. I liked her. I did. She had guts and, being the time that this was all being taken place, so to speak. I thought the writing was well. Um, it's a slow burn, like I said. But the author did a good job at building the atmosphere, the tension, and uh, the world that they're living in. New England colonial times. There was another point I wanted to point on. I didn't write it down. I was just thinking about it. Oh, I can't remember. See, but there was something else I wanted to touch on with this story. Yeah, I lost it. Anyway, let me know if you've read it. It's a very popular story. Now, oh, that's what I wanted to touch on. There is gore in here. So if you're not a fan of goriness, there is a lot of gory type scenes and violent scenes. That doesn't bother me. I'm okay with gore and violence. Um, I was a little hesitant on reading this because it does mention demons, but they weren't, to me, they weren't scary demons. They're not the demons that I'm afraid of. Anyway, so overall, it was a good book. It is an older book. I want to say early 2000s, early to mid 2000s. So it's been around a while. It's quite a popular book. And so, yeah, let me know if you've read it. I'm curious on your thoughts and what you thought about it. All right, so the next book we're going to talk about is A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. I like this book. Oh, Slewfoot, I gave it 4 stars. I like this book, A Head Full of Ghosts. And I originally gave it 4 stars, but I think I'm going to bump it up to 4.5 because I'm still thinking about it. And to me, if I'm still thinking about it, then the author did a good job, right? All right, so in this book, and this again is another slow burn, we are following a family, the Barrett family. Mary Tremblay, Marjorie, the father's John, and I think the mother's name is Sarah or Karen. Sarah, I think. Anyway, this book is written like past and present tense. So in the past, the story is being told by 8-year-old Mary Barrett. Is it Barrett? Yes. And also being told in the present time, Mary as an adult speaking to a journalist telling the story. So, as an 8-year-old child, Mary's sister is we think mentally ill, possibly schizophrenia. But because the father has been kind of getting a little more, his religious fanaticism has been growing, he's consulting with a priest at the local church. So Mary does all these unusual things. Now, this isn't like, it's kind of has the vibe of The Exorcist. Now, I never read The Exorcist, and I've only seen 1 or 2 scenes of that movie, and to this day, I can't get those visions out of my head. Again, I blame my mother and my brother. Who lets children 6, 7, 8 years old see stuff like that on TV? Really, I'm traumatized. Anyway, that's why I don't read these crazy, scary, demonic books. Anyway, so this has that vibe, but it's not frightening like that. Okay, she has unusual behavior. Her and Marjorie and Mary are very close. Marjorie is the older sister. Mary's 8, Marjorie's 14. And they have this relationship, and Mary loves her sister, and Marjorie appears to also love Mary very much. But she does things that from time to time scare Mary because of her illness. So back to the dad. So one day he takes Mary to the church. Now they feel that she may be demon possessed. And, the priest is concerned, the father's concerned. And they're going to do an exorcism on Marjorie. And at the same time, I'm not sure how this happened, a reality TV show wants to do a story on all of this and all that's going on with Marjorie. So they welcome them into their home to capture a lot of this on film. And yeah. So the exorcism takes place, and things happen, things go on, everything's weird. Yeah, I don't want to go into any more than that, because again, I don't want to give any spoilers away. But here we have Mary telling the story, growing up with her sister Marjorie, who was either mentally ill or demon possessed. The premise here is, what I liked about the book, not the premise, is the author there's a lot of ambiguity in here. Throughout the story, you don't know, is she possessed or is she mentally ill? And, in being exploited by media and tortured, and not tortured, mentally tortured by, the father's religious fanaticism, thinking that she's demon possessed when really she needs psychiatric help or in medication. You go through the whole story not knowing, what is what here. And there is an event that takes place that is quite not traumatic, and oh my God, did that just happen? Yeah, I did. I enjoyed this book. Like I said, I'm going to give this one 4.5 stars. I liked it because it was slow paced, however, but not in a way of like, you're like, oh my God, come on. It wasn't like that. The whole building of the Marjorie's character and the changes she was taking, and Mary having this true love for her sister, and then that slow build of becoming fearful of her sister at the same time. And this was a good book. You know, the more I'm talking about it, the more I'm reflecting on it, this was a good book. So I'm going with 4.5 stars on this one. Yeah. I would recommend this book to people if that's something that you kind of like, because I'm still left thinking. Right now I am thinking about it. Like, not sure what, wow. Kind of like that one book I read, We Used to Live Here. That book left me thinking, like, uh, that's how this one left me. So yeah, I would suggest this book, and that is A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. All right, next one. Picked up another Darcy Coates book. I'm really liking this author. She's fun, 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 just fun. Like, there's some of the other books you have to really think through it, like when things are happening, and you got to follow it. And so far, this third book I've read by Darcy Coates, it's kind of like you just get to enjoy it. It's just a good story. And this book is The Whispering Dead. And this book is actually the beginning of a series, The Gravekeeper. I think it's called The Gravekeeper series. And this is book number 1. And in this book, we're following Kira. And Kira wakes up just outside a cemetery. Appears that she's been possibly in some kind of scuffle because she's bleeding from her arm and she's got a cut or something on her head. And it's raining, it's cold, it's dreary, it's nighttime, and she has no memory of who she is. So yeah, if you're not a fan of like amnesia tropes, that's this. So she doesn't know who she is. And she's running because whoever is after her, which she doesn't know because she can't remember anything, they're still after her. And she finds an old rundown church just outside the cemetery there. And she runs there. She goes there. The pastor opens the door. He takes her in. Now, from there, he lets her stay there. She has like a guest cottage or something. And it's like sits pretty much like in the cemetery. And shortly thereafter, Kira realizes that she can see ghosts. Now, she doesn't know if this is part of her life. She doesn't know, but she knows that she could see and communicate with ghosts. And good atmosphere in this book. It's a little bit gothic-y, and you got the feeling as they're describing, she's looking out the window and you could see the fog, the thick fog coming through the cemetery, and you could see the ghost coming towards her window. And I'm not telling you, this is all in the beginning of the book, you guys. So she realizes she can see and communicate with ghosts. And she realizes that the ghost she's communicating with is trying to tell her something. Now, in the meantime, yeah, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. She does make 2 friends while she's there, and she reveals to them her situation of where she cannot remember who she is and how she actually got to this small town that nobody comes to. And that's that's Zoe and Mason. So, through this friendship and Kira's determination to help this ghost, the story continues from there into resolving what the ghost wants to tell her and what the ghost story is. I don't want to get into that because I don't want to give it away, but that's the premise of what this book is about. I enjoyed it. It's cozy. Again, Darcy Coates seems to write cozy ghost stories, and I'm all for it. It was a fast-paced book. Just an enjoyable listen. I didn't have to put much thought into it. I could just enjoy the story and not think of like, what's the meaning? What's the author trying to tell me? One of those type of stories. It was just a good, ghosty, spooky story. Yeah, so if you haven't read anything by Darcy Coates, I highly suggest it if you just want light, easy reads and enjoyable stories that you could just relax with, right? Yeah, The Whispering Dead, that was good. I will probably pick up another book before the month's out. Probably. I have a few other books on my list that I want to get to as well, but I do want to grab some more of this series here and kind of finish off. I don't know how many books are in the series, maybe 5. I'm not sure. But anyway, Whispering Dead, Darcy Coates. I am giving this one 4 stars. Just a solid, enjoyable, spooky, cozy ghost story. All right, let's go on and talk about the next book that I picked up for the month of October. All right, so this next book was recommended to me by Martha from Martha's Fragrance Corner, and that is The Whisper Man by Alex North. When I was looking for spooky recommendations, this is the one she recommended, although she did state it's spooky, but it's also a serial killer book. And she was right. It is a serial killer story. We are following Tom and Jake Kennedy. And he recently lost his wife, Jake's mom. And Jake is young. I think he was, how old was Jake? 8 years old? I don't even know. He was a young boy. And so they're both still grieving. And they moved to a quiet town in the English countryside. I think it's called Featherbank. But this town has a haunted history, so to speak. There was a man nicknamed the Whisper Man. He was a serial killer. He used to lure young boys and torture and kill them. And he had since been convicted and he is in prison. However, there's been a recent... Oh, and one of the bodies, I think, was not found, I think. And there was a recent abduction of a boy, very similar to the MO that the Whisper Man used. Now, the Whisper Man used to whisper at young boys' windows. It was creepy. It was creepy. So an investigation is started, and somehow Jake and Tom get kind of intertwined in the story of the current missing child. Now, thing is Jake is also, because he's grieving, he has an imaginary friend, a little girl that he talks to, and he speaks of the whispering voices. So Tom, the father, he starts to get a little concerned. I don't want to give too much away, so I'm trying to, it was spooky in the sense the whole Whisper Man thing was kind of creepy. There was creepy atmosphere of things that went on that was a little disturbingly creepy. Overall, I thought it was a good book. Fit the spooky vibe because that whole whisper, it was creepy. It was just creepy. You kind of felt for this little boy. He was very, very intelligent and he's artistic, and he would draw pictures that could be a little disturbing, and the voices, the talking to something that isn't there. So it gives off a little bit of a supernatural vibe. So you don't know if there's really someone there or if the boy is just talking to imaginary friends, so to speak. Yeah. So they get involved in this mystery of the Whisper Man and the current boy that was abducted in it. So it's kind of like it's told from the inspector's point of view, what they're doing and what their detective work, as well as Jake and Tom are also narrating the story on their side. Tom feeling like, he's failing his son as a father, Jake feeling the loss of his mother. There's a lot going on in the story. However, everything all kind of works in and intertwines together. So I did enjoy that. Yeah, it was a good book. It was a good serial killer book, a little bit of a different, as I was reading, a lot of it gave me, Silence of the Lambs vibes, because Clarice goes to see Hannibal Lecter, and just as the detective, I think his name was Pete Willis, he goes to see Frank Carter, who is the Whisper Man that they caught years ago. He caught and imprisoned and put him away for his crimes. And he goes to see him, and he drops all these little clues, like he knows what's going on. So it gave me the Hannibal Lecter vibe, because Hannibal was kind of feeding Clarice clues, right? Because he knew who the person is. So it was creepy. The whole atmosphere, it was a very creepy book. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it to other readers who like psychological thrillers with a spooky atmospheric vibe to it. I think you would enjoy it. I'm giving this 4 stars. It was a solid book. It was a good read, a good listen. And I enjoyed it. So that's The Whisper Man by Alex North. Okay, let's talk about the next one. All right, so the next book that I read was The Sun Down Motel by Simone St. James. I always want to say Susan St. James. That's an actress, right? I don't know. It's Simone St. James. And I think this is the 3rd or 4th book I've read by Simone St. James. I enjoy her writing. It's pretty good. I often forget that, I should think about her when I'm looking for books on Libby or Hoopla. But anyway, in this book, this is like a dual timeline. And it goes back and forth between both timelines, each character telling the story. So we have Viv in 1982 and Viv's niece, Carly, in 2017. Now, Viv disappeared mysteriously some years earlier, back in 1982. And Carly is determined to find out what happened to her aunt. So back in 1982, Viv is traveling to New York. She wants to become an actress. And she ends up in a little town called Fell, New York. And she takes a job as a night clerk at the Sun Down Motel. Now, even back then, the Sun Down Motel was just a rundown, kind of like one of those motels that lonely people seem to gravitate to, whether it be drug dealers or it's not a great place. And things are happening at the Sun Down Motel, creepy things, ghostly things. And when Carly gets there in 2017, she also takes a job as a night clerk. And now things are even worse now. I mean, now the place is really beat. And she takes a night job there to do her investigating. And she's in her early 20s. So very early. I'm maybe like 21. 21. She's in college, but she's taking a little break because she feels the need to find out what happened to her mother's sister. And her mother's sister has recently passed, Carly's mom. No, I said that wrong. Carly's mom, not her mother's sister. Carly's mom recently passed, Viv's sister. And so, I don't know, she just feels the need that she just needs to do this. And so she talks to the locals and she's going through old records and, the Sundown has a past, murders, deaths, and she too is experiencing many of the same things. Lights that go off, doors that open and bang. The atmosphere of the book is really good. The author did a really good job at writing the atmosphere. It did give you spooky vibes. You could really feel this old rundown motel with a neon sign outside and in the middle of really nowhere. It's this little backwoods town. And So she's investigating, and at the same time, not at the same time, back in 1982, Viv was also investigating some murders that had taken place at or around the Sun Down Motel because she just didn't feel like things were right. And though the murders she was investigating were current, whereas now Carly's looking back into them as past murders, particularly against young women and young girls. So through Viv's investigating and her sleuthing and trying to go to the police, and nobody's listening to her. And Viv was very young at that time. She was only about 20. And she ends up putting herself in a lot of danger. And the book is like a cozy mystery with supernatural, spooky, ghosty vibes. I enjoyed it. I don't want to, obviously, I'm not going to tell you too much more than what's going on here. They're both and at the same time, Carly's investigating not only the disappearance of her aunt, but she's investigating the same murders and disappearances of these other young women. And also experiencing the same ghostly supernatural things that had happened to her aunt. Now, that got a little bit redundant because Viv's telling her story and, like while the ghostly stuff is happening. And at the same time, not at the same time, and in 2017, Carly's recapping the same things are happening to her. So that got to be a little bit like, okay, so, the ghosts aren't really doing anything different in 2017 than they were in 1982. But overall, I enjoyed the spooky atmosphere. I enjoyed the ghost story there. Yeah, I think it was a well-written book. It was a bit of a slow burn. It's not super fast-paced. It's on the slower pace, which is fine because even though it was slow, I was enjoying the characters themselves. For instance, Carly did make a couple friends, and it was just, it was nice to see the interaction, but to hear the interaction between them. It kept the story moving, and in her interviewing of, the past local police officer that was actually working at the time of her aunt's disappearance, another woman, a photographer, who knew Viv in the past, things like that. Yeah, I thought it was a good book. It was spooky, it was cozy, it was mysterious, and at the same time, we got the little bit of the mystery there. And I'm all for a mystery and a thriller type book. And this checked all my boxes. I'm giving it a solid 4 stars. I enjoyed it. It was entertaining. It kept me wanting to listen to it. So yeah, The Sun Down Motel by Simone St. James. It's a good book. If you like mystery, if you like ghosts, yeah, check this one out. All right, so let's move along to the next book. All right, so I've got 2 books to talk about here. The first one is The Amalfi Curse by Sarah Penner. This book it follows a dual timeline. Past is 1821 and then present day. In 1821, we're following the story of Marie De Luca. She's a sea witch, which they call, what is it? The Strenge de Mar, witches of the sea. So she's in a coven, and she is like not a conflict. She's conflicted with her emotions towards her powers and the sea because of the loss of her mother and her sister. Now, basically, what the Sea Witch Coven does is they protect the port that they live in, which is it's the Amalfi Coast in Positano. And so they protect the port from pirates, and they also help bring in the fish and, to keep the economy going in the seafaring lands. then we got present day is we're following Haven Ambrose. Now she is an archaeologist and she's an experienced diver, and she comes into Positano to study shipwrecks. However, there's kind of an ulterior motive behind her being there because she has recently lost her dad and has told her about riches that he found, and he was going to go back and gather them in the sea, but then he passed away. Now, it's in my way. I could see it there. So anyway, there's my ADD going. So while she's there, she's also starts to learn about the folklore of the sea witches, and a small little side romance starts to blossom there. And back in 1821 with Mari, there's also a romance in that timeline. Lose my words. So we got these two timelines, two romances. That is not the whole book, but it's there. It's a piece of it. However, I find the romance aspect of it in present day is kind of weak, whereas in the past with Mari, it's very strong. It leads the book. It guides her. Yeah. So the Amalfi Curse. Yeah, I don't want to give too much of the book away. So these two timelines kind of converge, and the archaeologist piece of it with Haven, she uncovers things related to the curse and Mari, and they kind of come together towards the end of the story and intertwine they overlap. I enjoyed the book. Like I said, I don't want to say too much more about it because then I'm giving you the whole story. But if you like witches and magical realism, I did enjoy the magical realism in this. I'm finding I do enjoy magical realism in books. This book I have given 4 stars. I thought it was a strong book. I thought it was well written. I do have another book by Sarah Penner. It's somewhere over here. It might be The Lost Apothecary. I'm not sure. It's somewhere on my shelf, somewhere in here. So I'll probably read that. I'm looking up there for it. I'm probably going to read that book rather than listen to it. This one was on audio. I'm going to read it because I have it. Anyway, I liked her writing style. I liked the atmosphere that she gave from the Amalfi Coast, and it kind of brought you into the town of Positano in Italy. Yeah, it was good. It was an engaging story. I appreciated the romance piece of it because it wasn't graphic romance, but it was there. It added to the story. There was reason behind it. Yeah, so I'm giving this one 4 stars, and that's The Amalfi Curse by Sarah Penner. Yeah. I feel like I didn't tell you much about the story, but again, I struggle because I don't want to give the book away. Anyway, the next book is Staircase in the Woods by, oh my God, what was his name? Wendig. Chuck. His last name's Wendig. Ralph? Chuck. It's on the screen. Anyway, I struggled with this one. Trying to think if I bought this one or if I rented it. I don't remember. No, it was through Audible. However, I recently found out when you're an unlimited, I subscribe to Amazon Music Unlimited, and I recently found out I get 1 free read a month. So that's where I read this one. Okay. So I struggled with it. In this story, we're following a group of 5 friends. And this is also a dual timeline. This goes back to 1998 when they're in high school, teenagers, to, I don't want to say, but I guess it's present day, okay? To their adulthood. And I use that lightly, adulthood. And I'll get to that. So we're following 5 friends. We've got Maddie, Hamish, Owen, Nick, and Lore. So, and they're all a group of misfits. And they go out one day to the woods to get drunk and high and party and whatnot. And while they're there, they see this mysterious staircase in the woods. And Maddie goes up the staircase and Maddie doesn't come back down. So now the kids are all freaking out. You know, what happened to Maddie? Where is he? He's gone and, you know, disappears. Flash forward, present day. Nick lures the group back to the woods. And they have this pact called the Covenant, and where they kind of always protect each other. And, you know, this is where I struggle. They're supposed to be adults. And through the entire story, the dialogue was immature. And I struggled with that because I'm like, just dude, man, you know, it just, yeah, it was really, I struggled with it. So it was taken away from the story, the dialogue between these characters, and I didn't really like any of the characters. I thought the characters were either weak, boring, annoying, and the other one I just didn't like at all. Lore, I did not like her at all. What else? Another thing I didn't like was the author wrote in a lot of political ongoings that are happening in our current time with controversy right now that's going on in the news between transgender, pan people, what do they call people who like have sex with anybody because they're gender fluid? I don't know. I didn't like Lore. I just didn't like her. And he wrote a lot of this into the story, and it was unnecessary. We didn't need that controversial stuff in the book. It didn't need it. So I didn't like her at all. Okay, so they get lured back to the woods because Nick is like, you know, we left Maddie and that's the covenant. And again, immaturity. So they're going to climb the staircase and find out what happens. And this leads to, again, I'm not going to say what happens here because it's going to give a lot of the story away, because leading up to that point, you're curious, like, what's in the stairway? Where does that staircase go? So I don't want to give that away. They climb the staircase, and that's where the horror takes place, because it's a horror story, but it wasn't gory horror. It was more psychological. The book spends a lot of time digging into the pasts of each of these misfit people that are now supposedly adults, but they're still reading as misfit teenagers. So yeah, there's that. It kind of gave me It vibes from Stephen King. However, Stephen King's book was much better written. The characters themselves, he did a better job of separating the young group of kids from Derry, Maine to the adults that are brought back to Derry, Maine for the rest of the horror. So that kind of felt very It-like to me. But I didn't like the characters. What I did like was I thought it was quite a creative storyline, especially when you got to the staircase part. I thought that was kind of creative, and different. I think it could have been spooky. Yeah, it was spooky. Yeah, it wasn't horror. Like, you weren't like, looking over your shoulder and, no jump scares type thing. It wasn't like that. It was just spooky. It was creepy. Um, yeah. But overall, I did not care for these characters. And like I said, it wasn't well written in the characters themselves from teenagers to adults because I couldn't decipher the age difference between the characters on both timelines. They were both the same to me, you silly, weird, goofy teenagers. Um, so yeah, for the most part, I'm going to give this book 3.75 stars. I'm being generous, and I'm giving that based on um the plot behind it. Oh, and I also didn't like the ending. The ending was just kind of left, kind of an ambiguous ending to the book. I didn't care for that. So anyway, 3.75 stars for The Staircase in the Woods by, I think his name is Chuck Wendig. I know I got the last name right. I just can't remember his first name. All right, so gonna go on and talk about this next book. Okay, so I have two books here to wrap up the month of October. First one is Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. He wrote the book and was a movie, The Bird Box. I didn't see The Bird Box. I heard it was creepy. I don't know. I'm not sure why I picked this book up. I don't know. I don't know if I saw somebody talking about it or if I came along in my feed. I don't remember, but for whatever reason, I read this book, listened to it, whatever. Same thing to me. I mean, I know people don't agree, but to me, it's the same thing. Instead of my voice, I'm listening to somebody else's voice. Anyway, so Incidents Around the House. This book, first, I was a little put off early on in the book because I realized that the whole book was narrated by a child. But I got used to that. But understandably, because the entire book is told from the child's view. And we're following 8-year-old Bella. Now, Bella lives in her house with her mom, her dad, and other mommy. Other mommy is like a malevolent entity, and she comes out and talks to Bella and real sweet and kind. At least she starts out sweet and kind. And every day or every night, she asks Bella, "Can I come into your heart?" And slowly, Bella starts to get frightened of other mommy. Other mommy started out was like her friend, and so she had like a fond feelings for other mommy. I found things that I did. One of the things I didn't like were the parents. Oh my God, to me, the parents of this child were so poorly written. Like, yeah, you'd have to read the book. I was like, is this, I thought, like, is this a joke? Is this like, when the parents did come into the narration part of it, which wasn't often, but when the dialogue did happen between the child and one of the parents, I was like, it was just bad. It was bad. I didn't like it. So I didn't like the parents at all. Did not like them. The book was very atmospheric. The entity became so powerful that it was getting stronger and more present more often. Yeah, I will say it did give me creepy vibes. This was the only book I read this month where I was creeped out. This one gave me like that, you know, looking over my shoulder, somebody there, you know, I did get that from it. So I guess it did its job in that respect. The little girl who read the story, who did the narrating of it, was fantastic. In fact, at times I'm thinking, did they use a voice changer or something? Because it was read so well. Yeah. So that was a plus. Made the story more doable, more listenable. Um, oh my God, I'm just remembering I have a DNF this month. I may have to pause this and go back to my um, story graph and find it. I can't remember what book it was. I'll get back to it. See, tell me I don't have ADD. Something's wrong with me. Whatever. So yeah, like I said, it gave the spooky vibes. It was creepy, but I don't know. You know, it I I think it's me. I think it's a me thing. A me problem. Um After a while it just starts to be like silly. I don't know. Yeah, like I'm thinking just I think it's a me thing. So I think going forward I need to stray away from that stuff because it's just, you know, it's not for me. And I think that's part of the reason I just didn't really like the story. And I didn't like the way it ended either. The ending was very done, over. And I was like, really? Can I have like 5, 10 more minutes? Um, yeah. Wasn't a fan of this book. I gave it 3 stars. I think that's being generous. Um, I probably should have gave it less. But I gave it 3 because I don't want to be too harsh on it because I think a lot of the reason I didn't like the book very much was because I just don't think these types of stories are my vibe. Um, that being said, I think the 3 stars is mainly contributes to the narrator's performance, really, because she was very good for a child. Yeah. So anyway, that is Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman, 3 stars. Now the next book. Oh, let's talk about this next one. I actually just finished it. And it's a Stephen King book. And, the classification is horror. But even when I read the synopsis on it, I said, this isn't a horror. But don't Stephen King's books always say horror? And they're really not. Not to me. But anyway, the book I read was Dolores Claiborne. And I got to tell you, I mean, not that I didn't think I wouldn't like it. I didn't think I would like it as much as I did. This story was fantastic. Fantastic. And now a lot of Stephen King readers didn't like the story, but I loved it. I loved it. Um, the book starts out we're with 65-year-old Dolores Claiborne. She is being interviewed by the police for the possible murder of her longtime employer, Vera. Oh my God, I forgot her last name already. Very wealthy woman. And I gotta tell you, so Dolores, rather than just say, I didn't do it or whatever, she tells them, you're gonna sit down and listen to my story. And she proceeds to tell her entire life story. It's just one long monologue. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. First of all, the narrator, oh my God, Frances, I forgot her name. Okay, was phenomenal. Phenomenal. So this story is taking place in Little Tall Island, and it's a small island off the coast of Maine. So she had the accent, and she is a spitfire and funny. I Within the first, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes of the book, I'm laughing. This woman, this character was hysterical. She was just hysterical. The way she spoke, her off the cuff remarks and her little quote things that she would throw in there, and funny. I really, really love this woman. So Dolores is working for Vera, and she's been working for her since she was like, in her early 30s. And she is in a terrible abusive marriage of like, well, it would have been like 30 some years, but her husband disappeared mysteriously 30 some years prior. And she gets into that about her story, and I can't say enough about it. The character that Stephen King created in Dolores Claiborne was fantastic, as was the secondary character, Vera. I mean, it was a small part, but I guess there's a movie. I didn't even know there was a movie, but I'm going to find the movie. I don't think I will enjoy it as much as the book, but I love this book. I'm giving it hands down. For me, it was a 5-star book. It's my favorite of the month. Yeah, this was a good one. I'm glad I decided to read it. Like I said, it didn't really fit into my Spookytober, but it's Stephen King, and supposedly he's the king of horror, but I've yet to read a scary Stephen King book yet. I even read it, and I didn't find it scary, and I didn't find Pet Sematary scary either. Creepy, weird, but not scary. I wouldn't, but that's me. Anyway, I'm going to pause this because I have to refresh my memory on what book it was that I DNF'd, because I was like, I can't do this. So hang on, I'll be back in a jiffy. Okay, the book that I did not finish was Diavola by Jennifer Marie Thorne. I got through 32% of the book. 32%. And I'm waiting. I'm like, at this point, I don't even remember the characters' names, because I thought there were too many characters. It was boring as hell. So basically what it is the one girl has her whole family come to this island in Italy, and they're staying at like an old villa, and supposedly, it's, I guess it's haunted. I don't know. 32% of the book, every now and then there was a little mention of like, what was that creaking noise? I couldn't do it. I says, this book, not for me. Boring. Nothing was happening. 32% into the book? At this point, there's got to be something, right? Something. And the family members were all, it was kind of like a dysfunctional family. I don't know, maybe that's what the book was supposed to be about, but I don't know. Because I DNF'd the book. So, yeah, Diavola by Jennifer Marie Thorne. I didn't get it. I thought it was super boring, and I thought, I'm not wasting any more time on this. Let's move on to another book. So, yeah, that was my DNF. Anyway, like I said, the book this month was just okay. It was an okay month. I thoroughly enjoyed the Darcy Coates books that I read. I really like her a lot, and I'm definitely going to read more of her. I probably would have read another one this month, but I ran out of Hoopla freebies. So, and there's a ton of her books in there. And I thought, well, I'm not going to buy the Audible book. I'm going to wait till next month and maybe pick up another one at that time. So I'm definitely going to go back to her. I enjoyed Come With Me, or was it Come With Me? I think it was Come With Me, but Malfi, Ronald Malfi, and Alex North, The Whisper Man. I enjoyed those. They did, but they didn't fit into the Spooky-tober thing. And I enjoyed the witch books that I read. They were okay. I will experiment with some more witchy books because I do like witch stories. So I'm going to stick with that. I love the cozy, ghosty stories that Darcy Coates has, and I'm definitely going to read more of her. They're just fun. I enjoyed that. And of course, the Stephen King. But other than that, the month was just kind of meh. It was okay. It was just okay. Anyway, so that's what I got for October. Let me know. Have you guys read anything interesting lately? I've got a few books on deck that I want to start soon for November. Yeah. What have you guys been reading? Do you have any standouts for yourself, like lately, that you were just like, oh my God, I gotta read this? I've got one. When I was watching Allie's Book Nook, I think that's the name of her channel. She mentioned one. It came in the library. I got it in my library, and it became available, and I had to suspend my hold because I wasn't ready to read it yet. So I have to unsuspend that so I can get that. And what was that book called? In These Woods, or it was not God of These Woods. Not that one. I read that. Well, you'll see it. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Something about In These Woods, I think, or something it's called. And she really raved about it, said it left a really good, a lasting impression on her. And I always look for books like that, ones that stay with me. Like, I'm still thinking about that book in an instant. That really stuck with me. So I got that book on deck to do, and and of course I'm going to throw in another Stephen King for my Stephen King journey to read all of his writings. So let me know, what are you guys reading? Did you read any of the books I read? What were your thoughts? And so that's a wrap for October, guys. Anyway, thank you for watching. I appreciate you, and I appreciate the time you take out of your day, your lives, your busy schedule, and you watch a video uploaded. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Helps my channel grow. And you all have a great day, great night, great week, weekend, whenever you happen to be watching. And we will chat again real soon. Bye.